Hello, my name is Jacob Walters, and for the next few minutes I'm going to be talking to you guys about my dissertation topic, which is the history of artillery forward observers. Now, artillery forward observers control the indirect firing of artillery weapons. This means that they move far in front of the cannons and howitzers to locate targets that the gun crews can't see. They then send map coordinates back to a fire direction center, which directs the guns to aim in such a way as to strike the target. Indirect fire targets are typically many miles away from the guns, and often deep behind enemy lines. Some modern indirect fire weapons can fire hundreds of kilometers, although the most common are typically effective out to about 57 kilometers. This ability to attack targets deep behind enemy lines developed in an official capacity during World War I. Up until then, artillery was usually co-located with the infantry and was considered a direct fire weapon, meaning that the crew would fire their cannon or their howitzer at a target that they could see, even though the range on those cannons was usually several miles and they could have engaged targets much farther away. Even though the artillery couldn't capitalize on this range advantage by using indirect fire and forward observers, they could shoot at infantry formations well before they were in range with their muskets, which meant that they were relatively safe being positioned near the front lines with their friendly infantry units. Imagine what you've seen in Civil War movies where there's a long line of troops, and on either flank of the troops, pulled right up to the front line, you also see the cannons. That's kind of how it worked, and the cannons fired directly at the enemy infantry. Now, in World War I, weapons technology had changed considerably. Infantrymen were equipped with high-powered bolt-action rifles that could hit targets almost as far out as the soldier firing them could see. A German Mauser, for example, was effective out to about 500 yards, and a machine gun could suppress targets up to a mile away. This meant that a battery of howitzers, which were very slow and difficult to maneuver, were now very vulnerable. They were so vulnerable, in fact, that it quickly became apparent to commanders on both sides that they were going to have to be moved well behind friendly lines, and methods of indirect fire were going to have to be developed. This would lead not only to a revolution in how artillery was used, but also to a revolution in how modern wars were fought. Once indirect artillery fire, with its vastly increased range, was part of modern warfare, targets could be engaged in depth. Both offensive and defensive operations could include artillery attacks on supply lines, logistical locations, and the opponent's reserve formations. Artillery could pound a retreating enemy or form a defensive barrier of high explosive rounds when a unit was cornered or about to be overrun. Artillery could be used not just to attack the enemy soldiers, but to shape the battlefield in other ways. It could bombard enemy formations before an infantry assault. It could deny the use of key terrain like hilltops, roads, and airfields. As technology developed, artillery could be used to deliver smoke rounds, poison gas, and illumination rounds, which were capable of lighting up large portions of the battlefield for night operations. My dissertation will focus on artillery forward observers and their role in the development of modern maneuver warfare from sometime after World War I to sometime shortly after the Cold War. I haven't quite narrowed down what the time frame is going to be yet. And it will seek to answer several specific questions. The first one is, how did forward observers and their role in the process of indirect fires develop as an occupational specialty from the end of World War II through the end of the Cold War? The second is, how did technology influence fire support tactics and doctrine from World War II through the Cold War? Number 3, what was the role of forward observers and other related personnel in the development of the land warfare doctrine used during the Cold War? And fourth, did changes to observe fire technology, tactics, and doctrine change how forward observers and their supporting personnel were integrated into the overall operations plan? And if so, what was the practical effect? Did it make indirect fires more responsive and more effective at massing fire at the decisive point in a battle? These questions are designed to answer more than just the basic question of what a forward observer was and what they did at various points in American military history. They seek also to locate the forward observer in post-World War II strategy, doctrine, and operational planning. They examine how they were integrated and how the evolution of observed fire tactics, techniques, and technologies affected how American military power was deployed. This research will also go beyond the role of forward observers in the employment of artillery and address their role in directing attack helicopters and attack aircraft. There are several reasons why this research is important. Most importantly, what we call modern warfare is characterized by combined arms operations. This means that more than one branch of the combat arms works together to achieve a synergistic effect. For example, in a modern operation, infantry often integrate field artillery fire into their maneuver plan in order to destroy and suppress enemy targets as they move about on the battlefield. Additionally, armor is deployed with the infantry to provide heavy firepower and neutralize enemy armor. By working together, these three branches achieve an effect that is greater than what they could each do on their own. The forward observer is the link between the infantry and/or armor and the field artillery. They are the hinge on which the combined arms concept swings. Without them, there is no fire support, and the artillery is limited in what it can achieve. Understanding the history of forward observers will allow military professionals to see what kinds of changes were circumstantial and what were fundamental. It will give those who develop doctrine and training a perspective that they do not currently have, because this is a type of history that simply is not taught at any level in the American military. Fire support at its core is about integration, and it is important for even the lowest ranking member of a fire support team to understand this. If artillery leaders understand their history, it is possible that they will be better equipped to pass this concept on to their subordinates and to make a difficult process a little easier to understand and implement. I hope that all made sense, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Put it in a reply on the discussion board, or send it to me in an email, whatever you're comfortable with. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you have a great weekend or a great week. Bye.